Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, the ESPN Top 100 Player Rank is out, and it's not as good as the Locked On one. I'll tell you where two Timberwolves players are between 51 and 100 on the list, and where the biggest discrepancies were, really where we had it right on the Locked On list and ESPN had it wrong. We'll do all that here next.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Happy hump day. Hopefully your week is going extremely well. We are now within a week from Timberwolves Media Day next Tuesday, 6 days from now. The Wolves kick off Media Day. We're less than 2 weeks away from the start of the preseason for Minnesota. I think there's preseason games next week. It's all happening very quickly. And this time of year is player rank time of year and projection time of year. We're doing a lot of that stuff recently. 2 weeks ago, our Locked On NBA Top 100 player list came out, and it is exquisite. It's great. I did like 5 shows on it. I did a show comparing my list that I submitted for that to the final list and the biggest differences, the similarities. And now ESPN is starting to release their top 100 player list. And I want to compare the two, find the biggest differences. And yes, the Locked On hosts were more, I guess optimistic would be the right word, or thought more highly of two Timberwolves players that fall within the 50 or 51 to 100 player range. So we'll talk about that. Some of the other big differences, a couple of the clear big ESPN biases here that I really come through on this list. So we'll do all that here on the show today. I think it's a ton of fun to do this. It's obviously there's some subjectivity here, but there's subjectively wrong answers on this ESPN list. So we'll do all that here today on the show. Big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, you can listen anywhere. You can watch on YouTube, and you can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. All right. So this list is out on ESPN. Again, it's 51 to 100 or 100 to 51. I don't know. Well, let's see. Actually, tomorrow, or today, I should say. Today, 11 through 50 comes out. So we'll have more stuff to talk about on Thursday, because undoubtedly I'm going to, I was encouraged to not see Rudy Gobert in here, which, by the way, is one area that clearly, I think we got wrong as a network. Rudy Gobert was ranked 51 on the Locked On list. And of course I had him at 45. He is not between 51 and 100 on the ESPN list. So he is a top 50 player according to ESPN. Locked On missed that one, I think. But I've got a couple of, well, we can start with the Timberwolves players actually, but I've got a whole list of guys who were in the 51 to 100 range on the ESPN list, but were not ranked at all by Locked On hosts. In fact, I think it's like 10 to 12 guys, which is actually a pretty high number when you think about it. I mean, you feel like there should be kind of consensus 100 plus or minus guys, right? Like we could all agree on, yeah, these are top 100 guys, but there's some guys ranked in the 70s on this list that we don't have at all on the Locked On list or on my list for that matter. Let's start with the two Timberwolves though. And these discrepancies aren't like massive, but a little bit surprising. The most surprising one is Naz Reid. Naz finished on the ESPN list. And actually, I'm not going to hit, we're going to talk Jaden McDaniels, but I want to hit Naz. And then right there at the end of this list, I want to talk about the, we'll call it the national bias. And I don't mean to be all get off my lawn, small markety right off the top here, but like there's some pretty clear issues here with this process. And I should also say this ESPN process is apparently they talked to, what was the number? It's like some crazy number of quote unquote experts. It's like 150. The ESPN NBA rank panel was 150 reporters, editors, producers, and analysts to rank players based on their predicted contributions, quality, and quantity, which implies that injury is factored in, whether it's the likelihood of an injury for a guy like Zion or somebody who is injured like a Kyrie, obviously like a Jason Tatum or a Tyrese Haliburton, who shouldn't be a top 100 player this year because so that's probably the biggest difference is we included those guys in our list, but we tried to factor in the injury. So we're projecting out a little bit further, which is why Tatum fell out of the top 5 on our list. Kyrie was further down the list. Haliburton fell out of the top 10 on our list. And those guys likely won't be on the ESPN list at all, if I'm understanding their criteria correctly. For this, and also for the 25-26 season only. So again, you wouldn't expect Tyrese Haliburton to be considered a top 100 player in a season he's not going to play in. So that's going to be a little bit of a difference between the two. But that's only like 3 to 4 guys that are probably going to be impacted by that criteria. Okay. So let's talk about Naz. On the ESPN list, Naz Reid is number 90. Last year, he was number 87 on the ESPN list. Okay, so he was 87 coming off of his Sixth Man of the Year award, which is still nuts that he was that low on the list. And he lost 3 spots. Now, before I get on a mini soapbox here, the Locked On NBA Top 100, we had him at 81. Okay, so we had him at 81. ESPN had him at 90. On my list, I had him at 78. So I had Naz 12 spots higher than ESPN. I had him 3 spots higher than Locked On, and Locked On had him 9 spots higher than what ESPN had him at. It's not hard to make an argument that Naz Reid is actually better this year than he was the year he won the Sixth Man of the Year award, or better last year, I should say. Why did he fall in player rank? Why did he not win Sixth Man? Well, it's pretty simple. The Timberwolves won 7 less games as a team. I mean, that's the most obvious answer. It's the only answer, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. Statistically speaking, there's a lot of volume-based stuff that improved for him. He started more games because of the injuries to Julius Randle and Rudy Gobert. So that was I guess it would have been tougher to give him the Sixth Man of the Year award for those reasons. But some of the other stuff for him, numbers-wise, is arguably better. There we go. My basketball reference froze. There we go. The points per game was up. The rebounds per game was up. Again, volume up because the minutes were up. If you want to look at rate-based stats, rebounding was about the same. Assist rate went up. Turnover rate went down. Like, the overall impact by a lot of different metrics was actually up for Naz Reid. He shot slightly more threes, and instead of shooting 41%, he shot 38%. But you could argue that he wasn't worse. He was every bit as effective, if not slightly better, in 2024-25 than he was in 23-24. But the team won 7 less games, and Naz didn't win a national award, and therefore he fell 3 spots on the ESPN NBA rank. I think that's messed up. I don't think that makes sense. We can hit Jaden now too, actually, and then I want to talk about a New York bias here. There's a pretty clear one that came through, but let's do Jaden here before we get to that. So Jaden McDaniels on this list was, let's see, he was number 75 on the ESPN list. I had him at 62 on my list, and he was 65 on the Locked On NBA Top 100 list. So 75 on the ESPN list, 10 spots lower than where we had him at Locked On. And needless to say, Locked On knows ball. Our hosts across the board, like, this isn't just me. And yes, I had him ranked 3 spots higher than the consensus. In fact, it's kind of funny. I had Jaden 3 spots higher on my list than the Locked On finalist, and I had Naz 3 spots higher on my list than the Locked On list. Either way, though, Naz was 9 spots higher on the Locked On list, and Jaden was 10 spots higher on the Locked On list. So ESPN docks Minnesota players 10 spots is what I'm learning, except for apparently Rudy. And by the way, there's not a whole lot in terms of the write-ups on ESPN to be worth it for me to regurgitate. Although I will say for Jaden, it has a signature stat. I think this is pretty interesting. Last season, McDaniels was one of 5 players in the entire NBA with 1,000 points, 100 steals, and 50 blocks. The others, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, OG Anunoby, Dyson Daniels, and James Harden. What a weird list. And what a weird stat. Anyway, so some Minnesota, snubs by ESPN, docking them 10 points, 10 slots based on the Locked On NBA Top 100 rankings. Again, it's not simply me. That's the Locked On consensus. There's a couple other things ESPN got kind of wacky on this list, and I'm going to go through guys like that stood out to me. There's, let's see, I got 7 guys who ESPN ranked a lot lower than myself and what Locked On did. And then I've got like 15 guys, maybe even 15 to 20 guys who are ranked much higher by ESPN than what we had on our list. And the context will be much more interesting once we get the full ESPN list over the next 2 days. But I want to focus on those biggest differences and try and kind of parse why. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at FanDuel. The NFL season is here. We're about to enter week 4 tomorrow, believe it or not. And FanDuel is making sure that you are ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Thursday Night Football, Seahawks at Cardinals. Seahawks are favored by 1.5. I think I said on the show yesterday I'd look at Seahawks money line. The way that the line shifted a little bit, I don't know. I mean, Seahawks money line now is minus 116. I'd still maybe lean there. I think both teams are maybe a little bit underrated on a national level. Being at the Cardinals, it's basically like a push on a neutral field these days is basically what that 1.5 line means. Vikings, by the way, in Ireland on Sunday, early game. It's what 8:30 Central, I believe, on Sunday. Vikings and Steelers. Minnesota's favored by 2.5, which feels about right. And I wouldn't mind taking the Vikings and laying the 2.5 there as well. But you can do any and every game. You can same game parlays. You can live bet the whole thing over at FanDuel. If you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That is FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Okay, so we talked about the Timberwolves players who were not on the list. I should mention Nickeil Alexander-Walker was like 97, as long as we're talking Wolves. He's like 97 on the ESPN list. Is that right? 97, 96? He's in the 90s. I lost him. Where'd he go? Anyway, trust me, he's in the 90s on the ESPN list. There he is, 96 on the ESPN list. Nickeil on the Locked On list was 97. So very close there as a former Timberwolf. Recently former Timberwolf. So clearly there won't be any Dante DiVincenzo on this list because he wasn't in the 51 to 100, and he didn't make our list either. I had him just outside my top 100 personally. And that means we're going to get Rudy Gobert, we're going to get Julius Randle, and we're going to get, of course, Anthony Edwards. Ant will assuredly be in the top 10, which will come out on Thursday. And I would assume both Randle and Gobert are, I think it's safe to assume they're in the 11 to 50 range. So that will come out today on Wednesday. So we'll talk about all that stuff moving forward. Shouldn't be any more Wolves that just don't, there should be total 5 Timberwolves on this list. Other things that stood out to me, guys that ESPN ranked much lower than we did on our list that I thought were interesting. The biggest discrepancy, weirdly, appears to be Norman Powell. The Locked On list had Norman Powell at number 60. However, ESPN has him at 82. Of course, recently, or not recently, he's now with the Miami Heat, formerly of the LA Clippers. And, he had the best season of his career last year. I think he was I've talked about this already about how I think he's a big loss for the Clippers. And, I don't know. I had him 52 on my list. I had him 30 spots higher than ESPN. The Locked On list had him 22 spots higher than ESPN. Having him, below some of these other guys that we'll talk about here in a little bit, on this list, he's ranked below I don't know, guys we didn't have ranked at all on our list. Am I doing the math right here? Jonas Valanciunas or I guess he's slightly ahead of Jonas Valanciunas. He's ranked behind Jabari Smith. We'll talk about him. He's ranked behind Derek Lively. I just think those things are goofy. Norman Powell affected winning. He the signature stat here is he led the NBA in points per touch and was second in effective field goal percentage on jumpers of anybody across the league. So to have him in the 80s seems really crazy to me. I think he's going to make a big difference for a Heat team that really needs him to make a big difference. That's the biggest discrepancy. The next biggest is, strangely, also a Heat player. Apparently ESPN has this anti-Heat bias, or maybe Locked On has a pro-Heat bias. Maybe Wes and David from Locked On Heat really, I don't know, maybe they had weighted voting somehow. We should probably see how that all shook out. We had Tyler Hero at 50 on our list. I actually had him at 50 on my personal list, the same as the Locked On list, and he was 68. Tyler Hero was 68 on the ESPN Top 100 list. And I mean, he's going to miss the start of the year, had surgery this offseason, but like was probably at his best season last year, certainly his most efficient year. He had to play make a bit more, obviously a lot of turmoil in Miami. And I think he is a top 50 player, barely. Again, I had him at 50, Locked On had him at 50. So that was surprising. I think Jaden was actually the next biggest gap. LaMelo Ball had a similar gap. LaMelo Ball, 63 on the ESPN list. We had him at 48 on the Locked On list. And I had him at 44 on my list. Obviously a polarizing guy, but he's so good offensively, understanding he's a negative defensively and his teams haven't won. I think the biggest issue is the impact on winning / lack of defense, and then also some injury concerns. But I think it's fair to say he's right on that kind of plus or minus top 50 player. And again, Locked On had him 15 spots higher than where ESPN had him. A couple others, DeMar DeRozan, we had at 69. He's at 80 on the ESPN list. I had him at 58 on mine. I generally have thought he's overrated, so that surprises me because apparently I am overrating him. Locked On is overrating him, according to the ESPN list. We talked about Naz, we talked about Jaden, and then Jrue Holiday would be the only other one that was significant. ESPN had Holiday all the way down at 91 on their list. We had him at 78, and I had him at 69. I've always really liked Jrue Holiday, and I still think, even though he's like, going to be 35 this year, he still clearly affects winning. I'm curious to see what that looks like in Portland and how that all shakes out under Chauncey Billups. But that's really it. There was only those 7 guys and there were a few that, obviously nothing was like, I shouldn't say nothing. There were a couple that actually were right on, but a lot of them were like within 5 to 10 slots. So I didn't note them. This was basically anyone that was an average of 10 or more slots different across my list and or the Locked On list versus ESPN. The ones that really got me though, were some of these guys that ranked significantly higher on the ESPN list than they ranked on our list. So how about this one? RJ Barrett is number 100 on the ESPN Top 100. That's not what got me, because I actually had him ranked 99, and the Locked On list had him ranked at 96. Last season, apparently, RJ Barrett, after being traded, remember he was traded midseason, not this year, but the year before, from New York to Toronto. Remember the Anunoby trade? He goes to Toronto. Following that year, so 12 months ago, he was ranked 53rd on this list. And I had to go to his basketball reference page, be like, what did I miss here? Nothing. I didn't miss anything. RJ Barrett didn't suddenly get 50 spots worse. He just never should have been considered the 53rd best player in the league at any point. And that's a pretty clear, he played for the Knicks. He scores. I don't know. And he didn't play, he played the exact same number of games, which wasn't enough, but he played 58 games in 23-24. He played 58 games this last year. He actually scored a little bit more if you just want to look at raw per game averages. But if you score 20 a game with the New York Knicks, people are like, you're probably a top 55 player. But you score 20 a game with the Toronto Raptors and you fall to 100 on this list. It's just bonkers. It makes no sense. I don't know. I don't get it. I can't find anything else that jumps off the page. I mean, he was a slightly worse 3-point shooter. Again, he averaged slightly more. All the advanced metrics are, if anything, slightly worse with Toronto, but the defense actually was measured out as better. It doesn't make sense. And along those same lines, Josh Hart would be another one. And that's actually this year's rank. ESPN has him at 69 on this list. I had him at 93 on my list and Locked On him at 87. So he was 18 spots higher on the ESPN list than the consensus Locked On, and 24 spots higher than where I had him. 69 is where Josh Hart is on this list. Fan favorite in the Garden, that'll do it, right? Here's your Knicks. I guess Knicks. I hate using the word bias in this situation. I mean, it's 150 voters or whatever, but the weight of these guys being on the Knicks and having success in a Knicks uniform and people in the Garden loving these guys, that where's Karl Anthony Towns going to be on this list? Remember, I actually had Cat higher on my list. I had him at 17 on my list, and he's 19 on the Locked On list. Is he going to crack the top 15 because of the Knicks stuff? That's possible. He sure might. And we should find out tomorrow or today, even Wednesday, when 11 to 50 is released. But between Josh Hart and RJ Barrett last year's ranking, it's just crazy to me what that clear kind of lean is. I want to talk about, there's like another 12 to 15 guys, including Cooper Flagg, that ESPN had ranked really high. A lot of guys, actually, probably 8 guys that they had ranked that we did not rank at all. So I'm going to list those guys and try and figure out what happened there. We'll do that here next to close out the show. All right, so getting past the Knicks stuff, let's talk about Cooper Flagg. So I explained this a couple weeks ago on the show. I was a bit stingy and maybe no fun, and maybe this is my get off my lawn moment. I didn't rank Cooper Flagg in my top 100. I think it's impossible to rank somebody who's never played a game, and people seem to think is a generational talent, but like, we'll see. Like, how's he going to affect winning? How is he going to impact the game for his team? He's going to be in a good situation, obviously, but I did not rank him in my top 100. It's a very hard thing to do. Locked On, overall, we had him at 80. ESPN has Cooper Flagg at 52. So we're saying that Cooper Flagg right now is better than Alex Caruso. Alex Caruso is 53. Do we think that's true? Do we think I know this isn't exactly what this is, but basically the implication here is you could take Alex Caruso off of the Oklahoma City Thunder, drop Cooper Flagg in, and say that, hey, they're not going to skip a beat. Obviously, he's got a higher ceiling than Alex Caruso, but again, this ranking is supposed to be for the 2025-26 season. It's not supposed to be who would you rather have on your team for the next 10 years or 5 years or 3 years. It's this season who's the better player. And I do not think Cooper Flagg will be a better player than Alex Caruso. Let's see, Dyson Daniels at 55, Isaiah Hartenstein at 56, Miles Turner at 57. Is he going to be better than Miles Turner this year? Is he going to be better than Trey Murphy at 58, Jalen Suggs at 59, Austin Reeves at 60? I think the answer is no. Zion at 61. Now, the availability thing matters. Like, if Zion only plays 55 games, is 75 to 80 games of Cooper Flagg better than 55 of Zion? Yeah, probably. But I think putting him at 52 is nuts. I don't mind trying to place him in the top 100, and I get why we have him as a network at Locked On at 80. But again, I did not put him in my top 100 because I think that's an impossible thing to try and parse, to try and really nail down. Similar lines, really. Paul George, similar but different, is 54 on this list. I had him at 83, and Locked On had him at 76. So 22 spots lower on the Locked On list. I had him at 29 spots lower. And what I mean by similar along those same lines is that, like, we didn't see a whole lot of Paul George last year. Like, how healthy is he at this age? Like, there's a lot of question marks. It's a bit like Zion, actually. That's probably a better comparison than Cooper Flagg. But to have Paul George at 54 seems pretty aggressive. Now, he was 21 a year ago when I kind of scoffed at Philadelphia doing what they did to get him. And turns out I was right about that. He played 41 games, so he played a half season last year. And when he played, he averaged his lowest points per game since 2011-12, so 13 years ago. Having him at 54 seems kind of crazy. Just going on down the list, Christian Braun was at 62 on this list. Christian Braun from the Nuggets at 62. I had him at 96. Locked On had him at 91. He averaged a career high last year, but and maybe he was just exposed to the lack of depth that they had, and he had to do more. But I don't think he was as effective. Even if the volume stuff went up, it was all opportunity based more than anything else. So having him as a top 62 is kind of crazy. Aaron Nesmith, 65 on the ESPN list. This is a function of the national, seeing him go to the finals. I had him at 74, which is closer. Locked On had him down at 90. So my ranking was actually within 9 of where ESPN had him. We talked about Josh Hart. And let's see, one more that we had ranked before we get into the unranked guys. Toumani Camara from Portland, we had at 100 on the Locked On list. I had him up at 81. ESPN has him at 78. So again, my ranking in line with the ESPN one, only 3 spots off, but Locked On 22 spots lower on Toumani Camara. Here are the guys that we didn't rank at all that ESPN had on the list. In the 90s, you've got a few guys. So this is, maybe only off by 5-10 spots, but Zach Edey, old friend Andrew Wiggins, technically old friend Walker Kessler, who was drafted by the Timberwolves and did the press conference and the whole thing, and then Stephon Castle. Those guys were all in the 90s on the ESPN list, not ranked for Locked On. And you go on down the list. Jonas Valanciunas, 87, ESPN not ranked for us. Jaden Ivey, 85, we did not rank him. Tobias Harris, 84, we did not rank him. Jonathan Kuminga, I didn't write down where it was, but it was around 80. We didn't rank him. And Yeko Kongwu, 79. We didn't rank him. I think the craziest ones are Jabari Smith at 74 and Derek Lively at 73. Neither one of those guys was ranked at all by myself or by my fellow Locked On hosts. They did not make the top 100, but they're top 75 players according to ESPN. I don't know. Like, I get the Rockets are better with Jabari Smith in the lineup versus outside of the lineup. But I just don't know. Like, I think his extension is aggressive. The extension he just got, I'm surprised he made the top 75 of this list. And along similar lines, Derek Lively, who, by the way, a year ago, he was ranked 56 on this list. That was coming off of what he did in that finals run for the Mavs last summer. And he was 56 that year. Now he's 73 on the list. Again, we did not rank him. So all those are surprising to me. I'm very curious to see where we land on these 11 to 50. I think this is probably where I get the most worked up because we're going to have undoubtedly, like, who knows? I mean, Cat's going to be, I don't know. I don't know what's going to get me the most worked up about this list, but there's going to be something crazy. And in fact, I didn't dig in on guys that I had in the 50s and 60s that aren't on the list yet, which means they're undoubtedly going to be in the top 50. Let's see. I'm just kind of skimming it quick. Well, Draymond's one. Draymond was on this list. I had him much higher. Where was Draymond? Draymond was 51. We had him 53. I had him actually at 38. So I was much higher on Draymond than ESPN or my fellow Locked On hosts. But we'll go down the list. I mean, there's a bunch of guys that undoubtedly I can't think of a great example, but there's going to be somebody who's I've got in the top 10 that's 30 or something crazy like that. That's definitely going to happen. So we'll talk about that on tomorrow's show. We'll find out very likely where Cat and Gobert and Randle all are, which will be fascinating. And then on Thursday, we'll find out where Ant is in the top 10. If he's not in the top 10, we'll definitely talk about that. And I'll give my thoughts and my reasons on my take as well on tomorrow's show, if that's the case. All right. So I got for you today. We're still daily Monday through Friday. And again, training camp starts next week, media day next Tuesday, just 6 days away. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. The Locked On NBA Top 100 I've been referencing 2 weeks ago, Monday through Friday, not last week, but the week before. I did a ton of segments on this list. You can also learn more about the list at Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. Of course, it's our experts who cover each of these teams and the players every single day. So our list is the best list out there for sure. Be sure to go check it out on Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Of course, Locked On Wolves is also part of the very same Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.